Tonight, we take a look at a surprise Strange New Worlds double feature. Then we'll do a deep dive on Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer and why it's the greatest movie, or not so much, ever made. All this coming up right now on The Writer Brothers. And welcome back to The Writer Brothers. I am your host, Petey York, joined by Mr. Corione, Witch in Residence, Mr. Pollo Zapatos, and of course, Mr. Scogliotin, and last and certainly not least, Miss H. Marie. Gentlemen and lady, how is everybody doing tonight? I want everybody to say so all at once. Go. No, I want you to keep talking. That's the last time I went skinny dipping in Mexico. So, good, everybody's enthusiastic. That's what I'm hearing tonight. Tonight we have got a packed show this evening. What? That's why I wanted everybody to talk at once.
Yeah,
so
okay, so we'll keep going again.
All right, so let's try that again. Everybody say at the same time how they're doing today, including you, H. Marie.
I was there sitting
You know what, so I was doing all right, but then,
the
Jerry Rose showed up, so I had to, get the stick with the fire, and I was like, with the fire, right?
So we have got a packed show tonight. Now that we can hear everybody, we have got so much to get into between Oppenheimer and 2 episodes of Strange New Worlds, but we have also got some rumblings at the Lucasfilm department. We didn't, of course, think that this was worthy of doing a live special for, but it definitely backs up what we've been covering since we last did our live specials. And Corione, why don't you go ahead and tee up what the latest Lucasfilm drama is?
Okay, so some of the basic stuff is pretty straightforward. We've got a couple of pieces of the Rosetta Stone as to what happened inside of Lucasfilm and what's led us to the current situation we're in. The long and short of it is Kennedy has not been fired because her contract won't allow that to happen. She cannot be let go for the performance of Lucasfilm. She can be let go for like morality reasons or for besmirching Disney's good name, things along those lines. She cannot be let go because her movies suck. So that's why
I would
she's
call
still
that
in
a
power.
princess clause.
Yeah, call it a princess clause, call it the participation trophy clause,
No,
like whatever you want.
that is a participation princess Madonna. Like I want all the possible negative clauses we can come up with because that is something that no company should ever agree to again. Oh, we have an atom bomb going off in the stream.
Nice.
I'm pretty sure that clause is the "I don't trust me and neither should you, but pay me."
Yeah, like however you want to put it, the basic premise is this: that because of this clause, they could not get rid of her for it. So what they've
You can do no wrong clause.
Yeah. So what they've started doing is they've been looking for any sort of wrongdoing they can possibly use to trigger, say, a morality clause issue or a defacing Disney clause kind of situation. Barring that, they're simply going to keep her out of the loop of functionality until such time as her contract runs out, and then they simply choose not to renew it. Now, we know that at one point there was a bit of a Disney or Lucasfilm civil war going on, where there were the two camps, the Jon Favreau camp and the Kathleen Kennedy camp. Well, apparently, Bob Iger stepped in and told Jon to stop because they couldn't get her out that way. And it was just going to tear the whole studio apart by continuing to do so. So that's kind of where we're in now.
That would have been, okay. So then that would validate my theory then as to why the Lucasfilm Civil War seemed to have just kind of gone away and then appeared more like a giant facade to fool all the YouTubers. I mean, that's what...
Right.
That was just a theory that I had, and that's what it started to seem like. But it seems that Jon was told to play nice and let her have her way with certain things. But it sounds like we've got confirmation though.
It was really more.
She didn't get any of her fingers on Ahsoka. Like,
yeah.
So okay.
That's 100% it.
Just like she didn't get her fingers on Mando season 1 or even season 2
or season 2. In fact, she did have a little bit of access to season 3, but what killed season 3 was part of season 3 was actually put in to try to fix the mess of the Book of Boba Fett. And because of that, they had to add episodes into Mando season 3 that didn't make sense. So it screwed up Mando season 3 by trying to salvage her work.
And Gina Carano got pulled off after filming had been completed.
Exactly.
So it was like a double entendre of fixing problems that they didn't cause.
Exactly that. Now, the other component to this is now the Nazgul are running things inside Lucasfilm, the Sparrow's 5 horsemen of Bob Iger. And they've been going after the Kennedy loyalists pretty heavily. They've been giving them like demeaning tasks in order to try to get them to quit so that Lucasfilm wouldn't have to pay out their contracts or anything.
Cheers, Captain Infinity. Good to see you.
Hey, Captain. So that's the basic premise. And that's kind of what we're at right now. Is we're in kind of a situation of now things are kind of at an equilibrium for now. Because Lucasfilm can't produce anything right now because of the actors' strike. They can't do anything really about Kennedy until she either does something stupid or her contract expires. Or they find something that she's done that's stupid. But Kennedy actually has no power anymore, so she can't actually do anything stupid enough to cause a problem to get her out. So we're in a waiting game. That being said, I think if you were eagerly anticipating the Acolyte being, a staple of your watch cycle, I think you're going to be waiting a very, very long time.
Yeah.
It'll come out right after the Rian Johnson trilogy.
Exactly, and then Taika Waititi or whatever. That's not even his real name, is it? Like,
no, it isn't.
Yeah. So Tiki Torch White Hickey when he can't, he does his Star Wars trilogy.
Wiki.
Right.
Either way.
But yeah, so I mean, we're that's kind of where that is. The next little piece I wanted to talk about is what a lot of us have been waiting for. Invincible season 2 has gotten a release date, November 9th. And because they love us so much in the fandom, they gave us an Atom Eve origin story episode. Right now, it's on Amazon. You can go watch it.
Oh,
It's an awful lot of fun.
gnarly.
Yeah, I enjoyed the heck out of it. They explain her backstory. It was worth watching. They've also done us another wonderful thing. They have already started season 3's development. But there will not be this massive gap in between season 2 and season 3. On top of that, Petey, you will be pleased to know that Amazon listened to you. They are not releasing this week to week. They are releasing it 4 episodes, 2 weeks off, 4 episodes, 2 weeks off. They're releasing it by plot point.
Season 1 of
Yeah,
Invincible
well,
is absolutely outstanding, everybody. If you haven't seen it, it's a superhero series on Amazon. It's animated, it's bloody, it's gory, it just ramps up as it goes. It's
I watched the first episode, but if they're
It's
trying
just
to
every
release
episode
it-
just builds and gets better and better and better until the end. You're just like, this is like it has the same trajectory as Silo did. It's like, wow, this thing is so good. The best things I've seen in 5 years.
Yeah. Well, speaking of shows that have come back from the dead, Futurama is also out, and I
Yep.
definitely recommend checking out the first episode. I did an initial reaction. I don't know if we'll get too into it on this show tonight, but yeah, no, it's off to a good start. I was a little worried because that second iteration gets pretty stupid pretty quickly, and rewatching it can be painful. I find myself skipping more episodes on more subsequent rewatches because I'm like, all right, this is
You're like,
period
oh yeah, this
specific
episode
humor,
was
or
next.
yeah. But then of course there's the jokes that I find that are timeless, that are so stupid and so simple, like the giant digital clock tower that changes from 3:59 to 4 and goes, the time is 4 a.m. I still find that joke to be stupid, and yet it's one of the funniest ones on the show.
Absolutely, man. Look, I
Echoed
mean,
in my headphones. I actually had the real effect from him saying that.
nice. I mean, personally, for me, one of my favorite moments in all of Futurama is the Hypnotoad.
All
Because
glory to the Hypnotoad.
because I don't know if you guys actually know this, but the sound effect for the Hypnotoad's effect was actually supposed to just be a placeholder sound. They were not intending to use that sound, but it was so ridiculous they were like, nah, leave it.
We're
This is
doing
hilarious.
it.
All right. Well, so to recap the Lucasfilm news, Kennedy's not allowed in the office. She's apparently going to go wind up Disney execs this week about it sometime. And of course, Iger's just not letting her in anywhere near Lucasfilm. And so it's just, I don't know how this is going to play out. I don't know if and when she officially gets the axe. But this isn't just coming from Sparrow that we're reporting either. Why is it that this news just keeps getting more and more interesting to us, Corey?
Well, to me, the most interesting part is it's not just that we're getting one leaker. It's not just that we're getting 2 leakers. It's that everybody who seems to be able to secure a communication line has been putting it out on YouTube that, Kennedy's days are numbered. And it seems like there's a lot of people that are pretty happy about this, that there's a solid resistance movement. And, we're getting close to Ahsoka. And Ahsoka could mean a new renaissance from Lucasfilm in terms of how they're telling stories, because we're going to see kind of the first project that Kennedy didn't have a lot of say in.
Since Mando.
Since
Season
Mando,
1
yeah.
And 2.
Yeah. So, you'll get to decide right now, as soon as Ahsoka drops.
Yeah, I fear
which
for the
you
sake of that
decide
show that they need Kennedy fired before it comes out. I think that is because, I see across the fandom so many people are like, oh, Mando Season 3 was it for me, which I'm not surprised with at all, because Mando Season 3 was going to be it for me until we found out that Lucas and Timothy Zahn were on set working with on this show to try and bring in elements from the Thrawn trilogy and get that, and then there's the possibility. Now we're hearing, though, in the mainstream that multiverse is happening. So we have multiverse happening for sure. And we've got Lucas and Timothy Zahn on set. I guess at this point, I think this is probably going to be one of those shows that'll hopefully get a resurgence in the middle of the season when we go, hey, this show is great.
Cautiously optimistic.
But that's why we're here. We'll watch the shows for you and let you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
And that's what I basically
and
tell
I
people.
am gonna. Yeah, and I'm gonna say this too. Look, if you hear our opinion and you have any suspicions about it, by all means, watch it, come back and comment to us because we love the discussion.
Wow, we'll talk about it.
Right? If
I'd love
you've got
to
a different, if you have a different take and you want to bring it up to us, bring it. I'd love to have that discussion. Who knows? We may learn something from that too.
Absolutely, yeah. That's where people learn. Goes back and forth too, all the time.
Absolutely. All right. So, any generic pop culture news you all want to cover or make mention of?
That's the big stuff for me.
All right.
Dude, I just touch on Barbie once before we jump off into everything else. One of the biggest things, I thought it was hilarious, but apparently a lot of people were under the illusion that Ryan Gosling is gonna play in some kind of wishy-washy like Power Hour film. Like, for me, when I went into this, I knew for a fact it was a joke, mostly because like I heard about them getting raided at Venice Beach by fan members, and the scenes that they were trying to film were actually like completely the opposite. It was mostly fangirls going, finally, Barbie's real. And a friend of mine actually took pictures there and like was a part of it. And I think that's hilarious because like the whole film ended up being exactly what I thought it was, which was an SNL comedy. And like, I heard a lot of people talking about how like this is not a good film for kids. And then, to me, I'm like, yeah, neither is Step Brothers, neither is Talladega Nights. Like the cast that we're about to showcase in Oppenheimer, their exact comedy brothers and sisters are the Barbie movie. That's like why Oppenheimer works, is because like nobody that's in Barbie would have worked in Oppenheimer and vice versa. Like it was two completely opposite movies, in that one you take seriously because the events actually happened, and then the other you laugh at because it's a joke.
It's one of the most wildly absurd things I've ever seen. It was hilarious.
Yeah, it was spectacular.
It was
and I thought it was
shockingly deep. I'm absolutely floored how good it was.
It was mature in the opposite direction of Lego. Like, it took all of the like parts of Lego movies where it's like, oh, cool, the action figures, they're doing these things. But then at the same time put the SNL cast in front of it. And I honestly felt like I was watching one of those SNL commercials for 2 hours straight.
Yeah.
Well,
and I loved every second of it. It's something I've asked for forever.
Yeah, real quick, Dahlia Lightwood writes and says, yo, everyone, good to be back. Yep, good to see you here. And
what's up, Dahlia?
Did anyone think Oppenheimer would be good for kids? LOL. Well, we've got a 1 hour block planned for the Oppenheimer discussion for the end of the
Straight to sleep. It's great for kids.
Yeah, no, I mean, we'll get into it, but
yeah. Speaking, I will say this though about the Barbie movie. I thought it was okay. So I did the Barbenheimer experience. I did them both back to back in like some sort of insane Iron Man kind of move, and I want to say that it was really cool because one is so much about life and one is so much about death. And one is such a comedy and one is such a tragedy, but they are both teaching or trying to teach important lessons along the way. So it was the peanut butter and jam of movie double features.
You
Like,
watched
two things-
Oppenheimer first, right?
Actually, I watched Oppenheimer second.
Oh, okay.
Same.
Because the only way I could get an Oppenheimer ticket in my area
Oh, yeah.
was I had to go to like a 10:15 show, and I got the last seat.
Oh,
Yeah, I think I think we're gonna have to see it, and we may have to put it on for next week's review. That might be the smart thing to do, because sounds like there's a lot of controversy that we should get right in the middle of. Of course, we'll be a little late to the party, but that's
my
fine.
biggest thing with the controversy is like everything they said is like technically true, but when you look at it through the lens of SNL and not the lens of big government trying to manipulate your children, it's funny or terrifying. Like in the terms of the SNL part, it's just everything SNL has done forever. They're almost always left-leaning progressive. And then in terms of like the opposite, where it's like, oh, look at these people trying to attack your kids, and it's like the biggest one for me is the Ken doll. I have never once heard anybody stand up for Ken. Everything I've ever heard about Ken as a character in a universe is pejorative. Like, you make fun of guys that are with girls and you're like, that's a Ken doll. Like, he has no form of character. All he is attractive for her and simps to her.
Trophy
So when I
husband.
saw Ryan Gosling be the exact definition of Ken doll that we all grew up using as slang, I was like, yeah, that's hilarious.
he was great.
Yeah,
He was
was
the
funny.
point is you're
so
not
funny.
supposed to like any of this superficiality.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, and I've never
But
even
yeah.
seen the movie, and I can gather that that's the whole point of the film. And that's the
But
other
no,
thing too.
but
One
that's
of the big
the thing
complaints.
that's so funny
one of the
about the whole writing
and
is
before-
everybody that is fighting is standing up for Ken for the first time in history. Somebody is actively standing up for Ken dolls everywhere, and I am just laughing at that comedy too, because that was the big joke.
Yeah,
is,
well,
like,
here's the
people
other
always
thing
say,
though
like,
too. Like,
but no, there's like a lot of talk about whether or not like men will just stand up for men because they have to. And it actually happened. They got them to do it, and that's
Well,
the biggest
okay,
joke.
well,
is even
all right,
Ken didn't stand up
all right,
for Ken.
I need to see it at this point, so I'd appreciate, just because now
Yeah,
it's like I'm gonna need to make my own opinion on it, and we'll have to do a formal review. So, but I do want to point out, like, one thing that does come to mind, because I watched the Critical Drinkers review, and he had nothing but scathing things to say about it. And the thing that I wanted to, that has me thinking right now from that review is in the opening, I guess, that the girls destroy their baby dolls. Okay, well,
No,
because they
they're
okay,
dolling.
so the biggest complaint with that has been that,
Like
oh, they're
Cabbage Patch
rejecting motherhood. Okay, first of all, why are we subjecting young girls that don't even, probably shouldn't know where babies come from at that age to that kind of influence? Like, what?
So H. Marie has a comment though. So
Okay.
let's-
Well, I just noticed we had early 2000s heartthrob versus early 2000s heartthrob Ryan Gosling versus Josh Hartnett this weekend.
yes.
That just popped in my head. That, like I said, a little bit of a weird comparison, but
Yeah, I just find it weird. Like, I really don't see why 6 to 12-year-olds need to be concerned or thinking about motherhood at such a young age to begin with. Like,
And
I
that's
think they'll have
the
their whole lives to
whole
figure that out.
joke. Like, to me, like, that's what I'm talking about. That's like the biggest complaints are the things that everybody goes, yeah, your kid's not supposed to be dealing with this. Why? Oh, this is an SNL movie. Like, it takes you one scene to go, I'm not watching a kid's movie. And I get a lot of parents were confused, and it's because you didn't read the cast. You just assumed that Barbie was for children, because that's part of the joke, is that this film is all about subverting your understanding because it's their understanding. They wrote it. They're telling the story, and that's hilarious. The amount of like levels to this prank is bar none, honestly, because it didn't hurt anything. It didn't hurt anyone. It just
All right, so
wasted money on a movie.
yeah, so we will cover Barbie, but we should kind of,
Yes.
move on and yeah. So, Petey, you're muted.
Right, we do have 2 episodes of Strange New Worlds we need to get to. One day I'll get this show right. Oh, look, I didn't even get the right text done. I gotta swap that out. One day I'm gonna have a perfectly run show, and make sure that you enjoy that day, because it's probably never gonna happen again. No. As Joe Piscopo would say, it's when you do it live, it comes with its quirks, and sometimes the mistakes are just part of the fun. But he doesn't say exactly that, but I'm paraphrasing. Sundays with Sinatra, check it out. Strange New Worlds, really kind of, I actually liked both episodes. If you guys want to talk about it real quick, about just quick overview while I pull up the synopsis for
Yeah, so we had one really serious, dark episode and one intentionally really humorous and light palate cleanser of an episode this week, which I thought was great. I mean, we actually kind of, the nice thing about Trek is they do realize that after they give us something really serious and dark and hard, they need to give us something a little more relaxed and amusing and like give us that palate cleanser. And look, Trek has silly episodes and Trek has serious episodes and Trek has a couple of in-between ones, and that's how it should be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, real quick, I wanted to... Sorry, I was going to type out this thought, but since the room went quiet. Dahlia Lightwood says, why doesn't anyone police politicize boys' toys? Funnily enough, John and I's mother actually did. So, it does happen, but you're right, it doesn't seem to happen. That's the conversation that doesn't seem to always get to the mainstream, is that, how much violence are we subjecting to young kids at certain ages. But at the same time, I actually had a thought about that recently, and sorry to tangent real quick, but I've noticed that the millennials and Gen Z Zoomers, we grew up with video games, which means a lot of us probably got a lot of those typically primal urges of anger and aggression out on pixels, oddly enough. And so, because, we get that at a young age, that's probably why, if you look at national crime statistics, like, overall violent crime has been going down. It went up recently because of COVID, but what did you expect?
And add to that,
people in their homes for
we got real-time responses from games like Assassin's Creed. Like, yeah, you could kill the bad guy, but kill a civilian, and it would be like 2 more errors.
It started introducing consequence. Exactly.
Yeah, so like, we had literal life and death consequences with none of the cost.
Yeah.
Like, that explains why most people are so, like, most Gen Zs and Wires and stuff, they're like so empathetic. It's like, did you guys not learn this from your video games? And their parents are like, when I grew up, we had Atari and Pong.
And I think now that I get ready, I think Dahlia just said it best to move on to our Lost in Translation overview, and that is let kids play with what inspires them. End of story. Yep, I have to pretty much agree with that. A couple of exceptions, if they find mom's special drawer, maybe, no, not the stuff.
Well, talk to them. That's how boundaries get taught.
All right.
Anyway.
Oh, well, so unfortunately, our IMDb storyline curator, Arnaud Thiel, has not graced their presence on Strange New Worlds. So for storyline, we get Uhura seems to be the only one who can hear a strange sound that seems to trigger terrifying hallucinations. Well, that's a very non-spoiler, straightforward, but without detail that you could have probably included a bit more on.
So, I mean, I love that,
All right, non-spoiler overview for this episode first. We'll keep the formula. Okay. We'll switch it back and forth for both episodes.
Okay. So, I mean, look, there's a lot that worked in this episode. There's an awful lot that worked. I am going to say that personally, I figured out the plot of this one probably within the first 10 minutes of the episode, which to me was kind of a detriment. I like it when, if there's a mystery, it takes me a little while to get there. But they gave us all the clues that you needed to solve this thing within the first 10 minutes and know exactly where it was going. I do like that the way they drew it out. I liked the callbacks to previous seasons. You know, I liked the character choices that got to make the calls that they got to make. And you know, the graphics are what we've expected from Strange New Worlds up into this date. So I think if you're looking for one of those episodes that you know, is of the serious tone, that has a little bit of risk and danger and the kind of stuff that you expect to run into on the frontier, this is probably the episode for you.
Yeah. John, real quick, your non-spoiler overview.
Yeah, this one is definitely a traditional Star Trek horror. In the sense, well, thriller. I would go it's softer than horror. There are some there's some grotesque imagery.
Okay, yes, but it's actually with good purpose. Like, it's
to
not.
me, like, I actually like that because, like, a lot of people say Star Trek, like, especially when they get mad at the next episode we're discussing, like, Star Trek's supposed to be serious, but then also they're complaining like, oh, it's too grotesque, and it's like, yeah, I kind of expect space to be that bad all the time. Like, Expanse for me really sets the tone for like early species that have interstellar travel, which they run into very often on Star Trek. So I would assume that like there would be more of that, you know, Firefly, Serenity stuff that's like grotesque and dark. And now they're finally getting that. And I always feel like it was a costume issue. I have no, like, I don't think that Gene Roddenberry wouldn't have added some dope alien monster grotesque effects if it could have been available at the time.
Yeah, there's an episode of TNG where a poor bastard red shirt dressed in a yellow uniform phases through the floor, and because she gets phased where she does and instantly, you know, gets re-phased properly, she dies instantly. But the image is pretty spooky with half her arms sticking out of the floor.
Yeah,
just
it's a great
torso.
one.
Like, it's pretty haunting. But the thing is, when it's used purposefully and you can justify it enough, that's when it makes, like, we're gonna get into it with Oppenheimer, because you know like how annoyed I was getting with the nudity in 1923, because it was just freaking, come on, figure it out. But in Oppenheimer, it at first I was like, all right, Nolan put boobs in his movie, but we'll get into that in the next hour. For this, however, it made sense. They had the grotesque. All right, does anybody want to give non-spoiler real quick before we get into it?
Nah.
All right.
Give her.
Yeah, usually that's fine. We just need a couple of opinions to get this started. All right, so this is condition alert spoiler if you haven't seen it. Let's see, Dahlia Lightwood writes in, the original Star Trek did have monsters, just not CGI ones. They had fight scenes. Yes, that's right.
Oh, yeah.
But
Absolutely.
the problem is, it was, you know, and
Look.
then, you know, Kirk's iconic air kick, which I can't demonstrate on air because I don't have enough room. But
look, they had the Gorn, they had like the Horta, they had some monsters, and they did the best they could with the budget and capabilities they did at the time, right? If Gene was alive today, I could totally see an episode like this being made. And it wouldn't surprise me at all that they would go where they went.
I'm starting to agree with Rod Roddenberry. I don't agree with what Rod said when it came to season 1, but I think now at season 2, I think Gene would start giving his praise to the show, because it's the messages that it's packaging that are very wholesome. That's what's really, you know, this is what Star Trek is supposed to do. It's supposed to grow. It's supposed to evolve. It's not going to be what it was in TOS, but there's people who think TOS is perfection and the greatest thing ever, and don't get me wrong, some episodes are amazing. Others are not. So it's like the standards for Star Trek fluctuate by each person you talk to, and that's why I'm trying to organize a big Star Trek Day thing where we all get all the Star Trek, you know, friends together, and we first get to express freely why we love Star Trek and what we love about it, and then we're gonna start, you know, challenging each other's perspectives and ideas and going over the different problems and qualms, and I'm gonna convince everybody on that panel that Generations is where New Trek begins, not 2009. So
Okay.
it's, yeah, this whole episode is absolutely one of Star Trek's best. I think it is poorly rated on IMDb. I don't think that reflects the fact because, like, yeah, it deals with a lot, and we get to really see Captain Pike, you know, have a moment of where he has to trust his subordinate and make a very tough decision. And you know, in the end, it ends up being the right call. But it's I don't know. Would I have done differently? It's hard to say. I mean, I know who Uhura becomes, so it's kind of hard to judge this situation, you know, with future knowledge and not realizing, you know, Pike only knows his fate. He doesn't know if destroying the refinery was actually the right call, or if it was just Uhura having crazy hallucinations that were just too real and believable.
Blow it up, Captain.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, well, back to sickbay with you. You're gonna need some hallucinogen treatment.
No, I mean, look, there were some great moments in that regard, but there's also an interesting B plot in this one. And that's our new engineer spending time with number one. And them trying to work out their personal issues. And that was fantastic too. Because, you know, Hemmer left very, very big blue shoes to fill.
There's new Trek diehards that are actually just as mad as I am that he died.
Oh,
that,
look,
he should not have been killed off when he did, and I'm in 100% agree. Like, don't get me wrong, the new engineer she's quirky, and I like her in her own way, but I'm
Hemmer
also
was
like,
awesome.
I want Hemmer back.
Yeah, look, like, don't get me wrong, I like the space hippie babe, right? Like, and I'm going to refer to her as space hippie because that was like the perfect name for her. But space hippie is cool. Hemmer was the man, and I loved him for it. But I don't mind space hippie either, because
I think there was some issues with the
genuine,
makeup there with him and the actor.
Yeah, I mean, and it could have been, right?
Well,
I think that's what was going on there. What ultimately ended up happening.
Because I know
Because
the actor...
he's actually a blind guy.
The actor was actually legally blind, yeah.
He didn't kind of really know what he was getting into.
So he felt overwhelmed?
The makeup was the makeup was just too much, because it's seriously like at least probably 5 hours. Like,
okay, why don't they ever talk about that? Put that in the front. Like, if they had said that, then I'd be like, oh, it sucks. We only got him like 3 episodes and then he died. But that changes my perspective on the whole show. I might even go freaking pull my video comparison, because that was one of my big points in comparing it to the Orville. Was the Orville handled a 1-season character arc like in the way that you should handle a 1-season character arc. That character gets to know the crew and becomes an important part of it. And she actually started like, I could not stand that person's guts. And then, spoilers for those who haven't seen the Orville season 3, when she died, I was like, what? And then Isaac's speech, it was, you know, freaking, I couldn't.
That was wild.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but I mean, and look, okay, I'm going to say this. If we lost Hemmer because of real world issues, that's a tragedy, but an understandable one.
Yes.
That being said, from a plot perspective, I'm still mad as hell we lost him. Okay?
Yeah,
like, I'm still mad as hell we lost him.
And then the whole
retconning
the Gorn and making them like the aliens from Alien, and it was just like, which I could you could hide behind the genome as an excuse. Like, these could be like a separate, like, cousins of the Gorn that we meet later in TOS. But for now, it's, you know, these crazy, weird, but that's headcanon. We need to hear that on screen, not from me making that up for you. Occupy Wallets writes in, hello, I consider myself a writer cousin.
Nice.
Well,
you know, I would even allow you the title of writer redheaded stepchild if you wish.
That's up to you. Yeah. Yeah. So overall, it was a very Star Trek episode, and it was
a fantastically Trek episode.
This season, as much as I hate to say it, is definitely taking it. So first of all, I watched the trailer for this season, and I was like, oh crap, it's more Nick Jr. TOS. And then we watched the first episode, and I was like, all right, it's, you know, kind of popcorn Star Trek. It is what it is. But then I think from episode 2 on, it's slowly been proving itself with its writing, and I get that people don't like the style, they don't like the
It's
characters.
taking some chances too, though. It's not.
right.
It's not just trying to be cookie cutter.
Doing the Spock thing, making him human, was not a cheap trick at all. They actually put some nuance with how they went about it in exposing the hypocrisy of Vulcan culture. And it was very, or not necessarily the hypocrisy, but the arrogance that, oh, no human could complete this ritual. Think again. And yeah. So of course we got to get into our next episode now, because I'm going to start talking on stuff that's on it. But it's finding its stride, and I hate to say it, but I think it has earned the right to do a musical episode, as hard as that's going to be to watch and review and talk
Cautiously optimistic.
But if we sat through the intro to Enterprise for 4 seasons and you like Enterprise, well, guess what? Strange New Worlds has the 3rd best intro, in my opinion, so I would say that it can get away with one. Okay? Depending on how it goes, we'll see. But so far, everything I've seen in the trailers has subverted my expectations. The whole thing with Kirk, you know, oh, I'm from outer space. Oh, that was alternate timeline Kirk. Gotcha. Oh,
Yeah.
Spock being
Did you
all...
catch that in this episode, by the way? That they mentioned that Kirk's dad was still alive while he was a kid. This is a 3rd timeline now. Because we had the original timeline, which goes all the way to Deep Space Nine and Voyager. We had the 2009 timeline.
I would actually say the original timeline goes from TOS to DS9 Season 3. Generations, that's the Trek starting point, in my opinion.
Yeah, okay.
Voyager does try to get back to classic Trek. I'll give it that. It does. It did make an attempt. Badly, but it tried.
But we have a 3rd timeline now, because Kirk knew his father.
Well, wait, didn't he in the original timeline?
In the original timeline, he did as well. But we have deviated from the original timeline in a couple of different ways.
Because of the eugenics wars, that already offsets it. And it actually, so I'll just go ahead and get into my nerd theory real quick before we do the next episode. So I think that I'm in agreement that Strange New Worlds isn't its own timeline. I think Strange New Worlds and Discovery take place in the same timeline as Enterprise. The aesthetic matches up perfectly from Enterprise. And so, you know, how Picard works into this is hard to say, because here's what happened. Next Generation, season 7, or last 7 seasons. Okay, Generations comes along. Generations kills the crew on screen. Or most of the crew. 99% of the crew is all killed when Veridian 3 explodes. Spoilers for those who haven't seen Generations. Picard is then taken to Magical Nexus Bullshit Land, where he meets Kirk in Magical Nexus Bullshit Land, and Magical Nexus Bullshit Land is somehow able to take Kirk and put him in the future with Picard, while also putting Picard back in the future, which now obviously creates a whole new timeline of events, because Kirk was presumed dead when he got sucked into Magical Bullshit Nexus Land. But we saw the crew actually die, so all the crew that we saw in Season 7 for those seasons of TNG, they die. You see them die. They're dead. They don't come back. The people that Picard has are in either a new timeline or it's a nightmare of the Nexus. We don't know.
It's a fever dream from the Nexus.
Actually,
it's a stupid plot device that just creates more problems than
Actually,
fixes.
I have a way to fix the Nexus plot device for you entirely.
Nuke it?
No. The
Start
Nexus?
over?
No, the Nexus is a portal to the Q continuum.
Of course. But we run into the problem that we do with First Contact. That's a headcanon retcon. My First Contact retcon, because, you know, all right, First Contact, praised is a great movie. Don't get me wrong. I love elements of it. I think it was cool that they go back, but this is also, right, this plays into my theory anyway. First Contact. You know, for some reason, the Borg decide, hey, remember that time we invaded Sector 001? I just got this great idea myself. I'm going to do the exact same thing again and see how it goes. Oh, no.
You're going to still send one ship?
I got defeated again. Wait. Didn't we just assimilate and install a flux capacitor in the escape sphere last week? I've got it. Okay, new plan. We're going to go back in time. Even though...
How far back should we go? Should we go back like 7 years?
Yeah, even though we could have taken a cube, parked it on the edge of Federation space, gone back in time there, then taken the cube to invade prehistoric Earth. But no. Time travel is the plan B plot. Now, my headcanon retcon for this is that to avoid temporal investigations or people in the temporal Cold War from interfering with this plan, they needed the explosion of the cube to hide the portal in that only the Enterprise was able to detect. And but again, that's headcanon. That's not canon. So therefore, what we have on screen is a crappy time travel plot. And that's the biggest issue I have with that particular movie. And then Insurrection is just a 2-hour TNG episode that whatever. And Nemesis is the second worst Star Trek film ever made. Generations being the first. And then from there, we've got... So then, right, I got off track. My bad. Go back to First Contact. What happens in Enterprise? The Borg that were left behind from First Contact get discovered. That did not happen in the TOS timeline. New timeline. Therefore, the Enterprise timeline gets changed, and knowledge of Borg technology would probably influence Starfleet to change some things. Maybe ship designs do get a little bit bigger. Maybe they go back to the Constitution after having some encounters with enemies they weren't supposed to yet, and go, you know what? Let's just up the scale by about 40%. Bigger ship, more crew, more easier to deal with problems. At least that's how I retconned the 2009 timeline. But that's just it.
I mean, look, to like I said, that's how I kind of fixed Generations for myself. Was that I was like, no, it's a portal into the Nexus, and that's also why Q was so interested in Picard, was because he was one of the humans that actually made it into the Continuum, right?
Yeah.
But again, my headcanon. That all being said, look, after getting a serious episode like we did with the last one, it felt good to get a goofy, silly, a little bit stupid at times episode like the next one.
Yeah.
It was a palate cleanser, right?
Yep. Real quick, Occupy Wallace writes in, excuse me, I had a burp there. The Trek writers are not smart. I wish Berman would come back and Riker was his way back. See, I'm sorry, but I'm not sold to be... After the rant I just said, I think I made it clear that how I feel about Berman's Star Trek. Like, it has good moments and strong points, but once you hit Star Trek Generations, like, it just continues to spiral, and it's like all the problems... Discovery is just a bad show. It speaks for itself. Go watch it. And if you end up liking it, great. Happy for you. Not for me. But you can just watch and decide for yourself with Discovery. However, Strange New Worlds is making improvements. This season has not been any more or less cringe than the original series. So, it hasn't done anything bad or super... It's just people are offended because, it's disrespecting the characters. Well, speaking of surprises that changed everything, I think we're just going to leave the spoiler alert thing on.
Yeah, let's just do it.
This was the episode that also surprised me because when I heard this was coming, a crossover with a stupid cartoon? Are you kidding me? Now, from my Lower Decks perspective, I'll get mine real quick and then I'll hand it to you, Corion.
Sure.
I watched episode 1 of season 1 of Lower Decks. Hated it. Thought everything about that episode was everything that I, dealt with growing up as a kid in high school as a Star Trek fan. It was basically like watching the bullying all over again. And I'm like, I'm not fucking dealing with this again. So I skipped it. And then I heard that, the Titan showed up and Riker was in season, at the end of the season or whatever, saves the day. I watched that scene on YouTube. Really liked it. Good enough for me. Don't need to see the rest of this season. Finally, season 2 came along and it sounded like they gave Boimler his moment. They made him actually, heroic. And I thought, all right, I'll check it out. I watched it. I ended up liking it. I caught up on season 2. Decided to watch all of season 2. By the end of season 2, I was like, okay, I'm invested in the plot to see what happens in season 3. Season 3 came in strong, ended. I was not impressed with the ending personally, but I really liked the start, and the rest of all of season 3 had some cringe moments. But again, no more cringing than what I've seen on Strange New Worlds or even the original series. So take that as you will. It's definitely Rick and Morty Star Trek. However, this is the best part. It's taking those ideas of Roddenberry's Star Trek and Federation idealism, and it's presenting it to an audience that wouldn't otherwise hear. I do also hold that that Lower Decks Season 3 does have the worst episode of Star Trek. So bad that I turned it off and I never want to watch it again. I have never had that happen, yes, and I sat through Discovery Season 2. So, That should tell you how bad, despite the highs that this show gets, it's still about D+ passable Star Trek overall. Like, it's trying, and they've listened to the complaints, and they're trying to make their an effort. But I think we saw the direction that Lower Decks is probably going to be influenced to go. And I think this episode really showed us that they have been listening to the fans, because Boimler was without a doubt the best part of this whole episode. Riding shotgun with him as a fanboy with these guys, and watching him geek out over getting to work with Spock, and everybody all excited to meet Uhura. I mean, these are characters from the original series that have inspired other generations, and now they're being, talked about like heroes. Like all the complaints people have said, oh, it's so disrespectful. Here's Boimler and Mariner talking about how great all of these guys are. And of course she's more excited to meet Uhura, but okay.
That's okay.
People are allowed to have faith. There's people who like Chekhov more than Kirk. I know Shatner hates accepting that those people exist, but they're out there. Not everybody loves Captain Kirk. I'm a Sisko fan myself. I mean, I like a lot of... I think Kirk's probably second favorite, if I'm being honest. But, first is definitely Sisko.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so for me, look, my relationship with animation and Star Trek is kind of varied. I really liked the original series animated series.
Oh, real quick. Sorry. Occupy Wallet says Boimler should go fix Discovery. Good idea.
Yes. Yes. No, look. So, like, I really enjoyed the animated series of the original Star Trek animated series. Lower Decks, it didn't hit for me personally. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying it wasn't right for me in terms of the tone I wanted from Trek. That being said, if the rest of the episodes were like this, it would change my opinion. Because, yes, we had a pair of ensigns that are, hyperactive Zoomers, for lack of a better term. But they're also interacting with their heroes. And as someone who has managed to interact with his heroes from time to time, I can understand that nervous energy. I can understand being this like fanboy puppy dog person. So I get it, and I respect that. I thought the episode was cute, and I absolutely loved the opening of Strange New Worlds done as an animation.
Oh,
that was so good. Okay? I liked that, yes, Boimler caused a problem, and Boimler also tried to fix it. And he felt terrible about it. And he had a story arc and character progression, even though, if you had never seen any of Lower Decks, you could sit there going, okay, this character had a character progression to him. We got to see him being honest and genuine and caring about members of the crew. We got to see some deep concern. And all in all, look, the characters that they brought in, Mariner and Boimler, they have heart. And I can respect that, right? And putting them in this episode and having it be a cute little comedy kind of moment where the rest of the crew are like, God damn it, the future is full of morons, right? Like, those kind of moments were great, and I loved it. And it almost felt like there were a couple of moments where Pike was going to say, get off my damn lawn. Yeah. And that's the perfect part of it, right?
Well, and they also took those opportunities to, like, really package a very wholesome message, and a thing that I'm very particular about that I mention often is how precious the time that we have here and with the people that we're with really is. I look back to my time in the Coast Guard, and I miss some of those people that I served with. I miss those moments, but they'll never happen again because, I'm not in the service anymore myself, and also those people moved on to new units and new lives, and it's just, it doesn't work out where you get to have people around all the time, whether it's because of work transporters or, the unfortunate happens when it's time to move on from this life. And that's why absolutely, like, Boimler came through and really shined in that moment when he's like, sir, what if, do you really want them left wondering, wishing how many of them are going to wish they had an extra day with you? And that's when he encourages him to, go actually participate in his surprise birthday party. And it's like, everything about this is exactly what it was supposed to be. Boimler is supposed to be the adoring fan that gets to meet his heroes. He has nothing but love and respect for everything. I mean, Mariner even, you know, gets the professionalism backhand a couple of times, when she's told, no, you need to be serious right now. It's time to be quiet. And it's like, that's, you know, and then people ask, well, some of the other complaints I've seen is like, well, what did they expect on the future ships? It's like, guys, you need to remember, in the future, they serve on the Cerritos. The Cerritos is like kind of an armpit billet, so to speak. It's not a serious Federation
it's the
ship.
It's the slough house of
the other guys.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of them, because most individuals, especially even in the future, are still just going to be blue-collar, you know, workhorse types that don't necessarily have an internal monologue, and that's okay. However, you know, that doesn't mean that when you're on the flagship of the Federation that, you know, you behave like that. The expectation is, okay, you need to mind your P's and Q's, you need to sit, you know, you need to remember this is the big deal ship, and on the big deal ship, things are boring, things are straightforward, everything is, you know, there's a time and a place.
By the book.
Yeah, by the book.
And they are literally serving with their great-great-grandparents. And all anybody's ever heard from their great-grandparents was, back in my day, it wasn't that lax. So those thoughts are going to come into play.
Yep, and it's but it was all, like I said, all the complaints that people have said about the trailer, all the shows, the writers just decided to take them and have fun, and they answered them, I think, in a very satirical yet meaningful way, because every single episode of this has felt like Star Trek, because there's things to learn from it. There's value from this show. Like I said, those moments where Boimler is talking to Pike, it says, yeah, how many of them are going to wish they had an extra day to spend with you? And it's like...
Also, I'm going to say this. I didn't think I was going to enjoy the ending scene of this episode where they had the Strange New World cast animated. Oh man, was that perfect.
I'd be okay
that was
if the
so
show
much
was
fun.
like that.
Well, just having the what the hell was in this drink moment was perfect.
Exactly. No, it was a Star Trek episode in a way that could have, you know, there's so many ways that it could have been bad and terrible, and it's just, it's like it's at the point where people are just complaining to complain. And I mean, I see some familiar names in our chat tonight, and shout out, I know we guys covered it. It's like, I can promise you guys that we are not ever going to tell you what to think. We will get passionate, very passionate.
Disney sheepherder.
About our personal review, about our personal opinions and why they matter to us, and we will cling on to the things that matter, but we're gonna explain why they matter to us on a personal level. And if you feel that you should agree or disagree, that's basically the core of what we're about here. And that's how we believe that it's going to be about restoring respect in a discourse. Begins by having, you know, straightforward discussions like this and being able to respect people's opinions, but also being able to respect the fact that, you know, disagreeing with somebody does not make you better than them, nor does it make you less than them.
And like, look, I 100% stand by Occupy Wallet's comment where he says, you know, that he had a problem with the captain's hair. I think it was somebody in the
doesn't
back.
like Blue Trek, and that's fine. We will tell you our opinions of it, our honest and true opinions of it. And if you decide you want to watch it, great. If you don't decide you want to watch it, great. We're here to just give you guys information and help you make.
Well, I'm going to sit here with this honestly. Look, you don't like Pike's hair. That is a completely reasonable, and it's a backed up statement with something behind it. If he had just said, I don't like Pike, and didn't give any context, I'd have an issue. But he actually provides context. And that's all I ask.
Yeah. And
right?
I also want to, and that's also, like, also say, too, that they did dial down the ridiculousness of his hair this season. Thank God. Because, man, that was such a distraction. In season 1, it was getting worse and more cartoonish. And that's why I was like, and of course, you know, the season was getting worse and more cartoonish. So it worked and made sense. But this season has been strong. I think next week's episode is actually looking to be really good. And then, here we go with the musical. August 3rd. But, again, if you liked Enterprise, especially if you like the Enterprise theme song. 4 seasons of Enterprise. It's been a long road.
I have a feeling it's going to be really good.
It's probably
because
gonna be
like with the animated crossover episode, like they didn't lean really hard on that. Like at the core of it, it was a really good and interesting episode.
When they made
so.
Spock human, the whole point was not to make fun of or take advantage. Even Nurse Chapel knew that she had to return him to himself before him getting to tell her the truth. And then she ended up getting what she wanted anyway. So funny how that works. It's just, there's so much that is wrong with this at times. I get it, but there's also, it's generations on is what I refer to as the amazing Star Trek. This is where Star Trek no longer is Star Trek. It's now a new version, a new timeline, a new iteration, and that's all backed up by the fact that TNG movies are just bad. But
well, I think the other part of this is like the biggest thing is there are going to be mistakes, and with Star Wars, every time they made a mistake, they just called us haters. But clearly, when they made a bunch of mistakes in season 1, they came back, listened, learned, and said like they haven't disappointed yet. Like I love this Boimler episode because I never had a problem with Lower Decks because like Parker, what you said about episode 1 was 100% true, and I think that was kind of the point. Was like people were really mean to Star Trek fans, like, and for no reason other than that they were nerds. And nerds in a world where nerds are the reason we have fantastic phones, we have fantastic medical science, we have fantastic computing abilities. Like nerds literally make this world more fun. And the kids that were, in high school and in middle school enjoying it, they were literally just obliterated by anybody and everybody for no reason. Like there's no justification, and like that's where a lot of the movies about bullying make sense. But then when like you put all of this other stuff into it, like it really does cloud the judgment of everyone. And I think that's something Lower Decks knew immediately with what they were doing, because even as season 1 progressed and all the way into season 3, like they've always been about being the fans that were belittled so much that this is the best they could get was an animated series years later. And for Boimler to come on, and honestly, like the reason I can't give this episode a 7 out of 7 is like that dude's feet are huge. Like Frankenstein would be like, damn, Daniel, because those feet, that dude is so tall. That was like a 13-inch foot. It was insane. I was terrified. Other than that one horror scene where he wakes up in the bed. Great episode. Loved it.
So
it
your review is a solid 7.
Oh, yeah. All right.
I was good to say.
No, the Frankenstein feet thing, though. Like, now they have to add that to the cartoon.
Well, and that's what I liked about it though too, was the boots. The boots matched up with what they have in the show. So even the imprint with the Starfleet Delta and the star on the bottom, that's actually how they're drawn on the cartoon.
No, I know, but now Boimler needs to have like when he falls over, his foot is at least one character's calf length.
Yeah, no, I was surprised by how it worked and how seamless it felt, and it's apparently a classic, instant classic for a lot of the Star Trek fans out there as well. So that's really cool to see. It's nice to have this, and this is the other reason why, it's okay to stand your ground, whether you're 735 Club, whether you're Roddenberry Club, or whether you're Generations is the end of Star Trek like me. It doesn't matter. Because we need to take a step back and go, look, I can watch Star Trek TOS Season 4, 1 through 6, for those who haven't caught on to that yet. By today's standards, it's Season 4. I can watch DS9. I can watch select episodes of TOS, select episodes of TNG, and Enterprise. And I can have a great time with Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Galinda. Good to see you.
Hey!
Yeah, welcome to the chat. Absolutely. Well, we are pretty sure that on a Tuesday night at this time, you're not going to find better background noise than us. But anyway, we have now gone over, unfortunately, because we have such good Star Trek conversations. We're going to have to continue them next week with next week's review, because we have got to get to the greatest movie of my lifetime. Probably the greatest movie ever made, Oppenheimer. Now, of course, not everybody agrees, and that's why we love this show, is because we get to have good discussions like that. And but first, we need to go around the room, do our non-spoiler overview, so I can clip it later, which I'm never going to do. But in case we do, clip it for, to put it out there. All right. We have a new adjustment to our metric system. Now, for those who don't know, we rate movies on a 7-point scale. Why? Because we feel like it. Essentially, we found a scale that made more sense for how we want to grade movies versus, doing the 10 points, which it just 5 doesn't feel like enough, 10 feels like too much, 7 feels like a more fair metric to grade movies on. So we used to have what John has called a solid 7. Solid 7 doesn't necessarily mean that something is perfect, but it was so good and it was inspiring enough, we have enough justification that it's really good. It doesn't necessarily mean perfection. The problem is, the rare happenstance is going to happen where we find something that is arguably perfection. And I'm going to say that Oppenheimer is that modern day example of what a perfect movie is. Of course, we will argue why, but I have nothing bad to say about this film. I felt everything was on point. The music, the pacing, the way that the events went out in the story. And for those who don't know, the biggest historical inaccuracy was that the age between the guy who played Oppenheimer and the woman who played, what was her name? Her real life name is Florence Pugh, I believe.
The commie girlfriend.
Yeah, the actors are older than their real life counterparts that they played.
Yeah, she was like they were both in like their late 20s at the time.
No, he was in his 30s, she was in her 20s. In real life, there's a 20-year gap. So which I'm like, okay. Otherwise, everything that you see in this movie is pretty much it's based off of a book that is spot on accurate. This is a true account of the man and the real life struggle that mental struggle that he went through creating this thing and having to live with the consequences. And it's really just a sobering reminder that even the best of us, or no matter how well we intend our actions to be, are capable of such awesome destruction. And that's the thing that was one of the biggest takeaways for me of this movie, was how much I found myself relating to the character of Oppenheimer and in this film, but also realizing like he wasn't proud at all. He was proud of the work that people did because they did the work, but the end result, it almost seems like he would have rather it had just been avoided.
It gutted him, and that was
But
very
anyway,
obvious.
so my non-spoiler overview is greatest movie ever, and I'll explain why in the spoiler part. But Corey Owen, why don't you go ahead?
So to me, this movie, look, they got it absolutely right. This is a modern Prometheus myth playing out on screen. You're not supposed to like Oppenheimer. You are supposed to, however, identify with him. And I did a full video on my channel about him, about this movie. And the best thing I could say is, this is an example of somebody cursed with genius, right? Because the entire time he got away with so much, and then when consequences finally hit him, they gutted him, as they should, right? And that's what was super important about it, and deep and wonderful. And at the same time, seeing what was going on in the world and in his life and seeing it all play out. Look, I studied this guy in university, right? I studied all of these scientists in university. I sat down and I could sit there during this movie and be like, I remember seeing that guy's picture in my textbook, and man, did they get it right. This was one of the most seminal moments in the history of the human race, when we finally got the power to destroy ourselves completely. And you know what? They played it right. They played it from a perspective of, they made it clear how terrible and necessary this all was. And that the people involved were not the best people, but they were the necessary people. And that's what needed to be on screen, right? This was a tragedy playing out in really 3 timelines, and it deserved to. And I don't think you could have asked for a better director than Nolan. I think absolutely minimizing the amount of CG was absolutely
there is zero.
So there's zero. Like
zero.
Zeroing the CG out was absolutely the right call. Going with practical effects the whole way through was perfect.
$100 million budget, and they're able to do some of the best. I'm no longer praising Farce Awakens for its practical effects.
It wasn't even because he doesn't like CGI. It's a technical reason of the format changes when you do CGI. That's the reason there's zero.
I'm surprised nobody's mentioned how awesome it is that they were allowed to let off 2 more nukes. That was cool.
Well, they didn't quite, but the point of it remains, though, that this was so critically important that people understand the process that went through to create this. Because, if anything, I really hope the takeaway from this movie is the message that, look, every time you do something and you think about whether you could, you also need to stop and think about whether you should, right?
Especially when everybody is telling you should.
Yeah.
So
and John, I'll turn it right over to you. Like, go, dude, take it.
Yeah, for me, this movie, like, ran out of snacks early, so I was ready to be jaded because 3 hours and only 30 minutes worth of snacks. It is my fault. I got greedy early on, but it was awesome. Like, I watched one review over at the Night's Watch, and bless their hearts, because like they are younger, in the sense that like they didn't grasp, or at least in their review, they didn't seem to grasp like the gravity of this movie. Like, I understand that it basically plays like the Titanic in terms of action, and I understand that it like is up there with King's Speech and Lincoln in terms of like amount of oration. But this is one of those ones that like ever since 3 Mile Island, nuclear energy has just been made quiet. And this is one of those movies where it literally could have been a 3-hour propaganda to maintain the 3 Mile Island scare and fear. And instead, it actually made the scientists look human. Because like, I remember growing up in school and learning about the Manhattan Project, about how these heroes were smarter than the Nazis and they were faster than them. And they were able to do what they did and create the atom bomb, and they saved America. And, you know, awesome, Tony Stark. You won. And I always thought that this was pre-Iron Man Tony Stark. I always thought these scientists were right up there with the Nazis, especially as I grew to understand about like atomic energy and the amount of devastation it caused. And like, part of me feared that America was just funding our own version. And then watching this movie, like, I found out how human they were and how inhuman the military truly is. And to all the scientists in the future and forever in perpetuity, like, the general still works for you. And he will say, "Aye, sir," every single time. And you can even say, "It's aye, aye, sir," and fix him, because generals follow rules better than anyone. No matter how empowered and emboldened they are the best rule followers. So if you think that your general that is whispering in your ear is being overbearing and giving you dark Oppenheimer level advice, I can attest that you can say, "General, I need you to stand at parade rest and back up." And they will, because they follow rules. so you can have your authority back. And that's what Oppenheimer did to the best of his ability. And back in 1940s, no, those generals would have gotten away with killing you. One of them in the movie, one of my favorite, the colonel that was a part of the security detail, like the reason they pulled him in was because of how willing he was to murder people.
Yeah.
And without any care for law and order. So yeah, I understand Oppenheimer's resignation, but today, most of those generals, now they'll obey, they'll kowtow. So,
All right, real quick,
do your
H, where
job,
why
stand
don't
up
you
for
go with
yourself.
your overview, and then we'll let Skogli have his moment. Probably start bleeding into the spoiler review with Skogli.
Oh, I actually really enjoyed the movie. I was extremely fascinated by how well they replicated all of the effects in the movie without using any CGI whatsoever. It was just, honestly, I could probably go see it again when it comes to our local little theater here to see if there's anything more that I've missed, because there was a couple things I missed on our first viewing that I picked up in the second. And so, curious to see if there's any more that would show up in the third viewing.
All right, and the dissenter in the room, Mr. Skogli Yoten, who was not impressed somehow. I'm ready to find out how and convince him otherwise.
Oh, my
but we gotta
goodness.
start. We gotta listen.
Oh
so
my,
here we go.
oh my goodness. This movie failed to connect with me. I went into this movie thinking that I would love it because I like long and boring stuff. I'm legendarily the guy that will, put up with. This was easily one of the most colossally boring and profoundly boring movies I have ever seen. It succeeded in making an emotional connection with me about 2.5 hours in, when the movie was like over, and then you still got like an extra like hour of just
Okay.
everybody on screen was like deeply passionate about it, and I'm just like,
All right, spoilers are now authorized because it
If
sounds
I-
like
if
you gotta
I-
explain some reasons that are deeper than
if
just.
I was in the theater, I would have walked out. I was
Okay.
so colossally upset by the end of this movie. Like I've never turned a movie off in my life, and it was the most absolute soulless dredge I have ever seen. I would rather watch Citizen Kane half speed twice in a row. Jesus fucking Christ. I don't know. I hear people just absolutely raving about it. And then I'm like, am I alone in this? And I went online. No, I'm not alone in this.
Okay,
Yeah,
look, and that's reasonable. Look, I guess the piece that I would say to that is, look, unless you are connecting with the source material, unless you're connecting with the events, like, look, both John and Petey served in the military, so they have that aspect, right? I studied physics at NYU, so I have that aspect.
Hold on,
That's the thing. I'm pretty solid on the physics and everything, and like the most interesting parts of this movie to me were just such a surface level passing like mention that was also, I found.
Yeah, I also did a deep dive report on the atom bomb when I was in 8th grade, so I've had a fascination with the technology for a very long time.
Right.
And
but
of
like,
course I used it. Yeah, well, the thing that really shocked me with this film was like how much of it mirrored Galaxia, especially near the end. Like the tone and the feeling of after certain events that I don't necessarily want to spoil in the book. But it was like, I think that was the part that really got to me. But also, yes, I had done a report on this. I've always been fascinated by the atomic stuff. I've always been fascinated by all of it. And so I was connected. But I think the things why you really, I talked to your roommate on the stream the other day, Skogli, and I'm trying to get him to drag you to the movie theater because I think
twice
the biggest
at half speed.
the biggest thing with this movie is the soundtrack. Because without the soundtrack, you do not have the emotional connection that this film brings. Like, Nolan was actually involved in the making, and it wasn't Hans Zimmer this time, which I'm glad he didn't go with, because Hans Zimmer has a specific kind of style that works for Inception, Interstellar. I think I'm forgetting another Nolan movie he is. I think The Prestige was also Hans Zimmer.
Yeah.
And those sounds work for those movies. It would not have worked for this movie at all. We had a little bit of that in it, but we also had a lot of totally nuanced pieces of music. But the thing that also struck me was when he's asked, do you hear music, Mr. Oppenheimer? And I was like, oh, so the bomb was conceived by a creative. Alrighty then. But it's the whole thing that really shows the humanization of these people. It's the progression of the way that the events are pieced together and everything. It's all of this that happens in an immersive, and you get the theater experience. Like, you feel like you're at the bomb test. Because I know people complained about the sound. Okay, guys.
Oh no, that scene was awesome.
Yes. Okay, good. So there was a
Yeah. No, that was great. Like, and that I don't mean to be like, I'm here for the bomb, right? Like, I despise Michael Bay movies.
Fair.
I haven't watched most of the Avengers movies. I don't like movies like that. Like Citadel, that's not my jam. I don't watch movies like that. I watch slow, meticulous. I watch documentaries, and
I do too.
like I don't know.
I think, the quality, how you watch this film is going to make a difference. Like, I'm going to see it at IMAX, but I need to wait a couple of weeks to let this is a heavy film to get through. Like, it's not something that you just put on a Sunday afternoon, but it's not something that's probably ever going to be like one of those. It's not like The King's Speech for me, that I'll only watch it with people who've never seen it. I appreciate, the art of everything that this movie brings together by showing the visualizations in his head.
It's going to win. It's going to win the Oscar for cinematography.
Oh yeah, I think Napoleon's going to give it a run for its money, but Ridley Scott's Napoleon also looks really good. But I mean, for $100 million movie that didn't use a single bit of CGI, they built all those sets. They actually built miniatures and went out of their way to make a good-looking bomb effect. I mean, that whole scene, that is exactly what it would have felt like. Like, you wouldn't feel anything until the shockwave hit. You wouldn't hear anything until the shockwave
it was spectacular.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad you at least got some good
takeaways
from it.
Absolutely.
The narrative just wasn't for you.
The first, I don't know, there's just some emotional disconnect where I just absolutely could not care less about what they were talking about. It's just like, it was just so I don't know, it just seemed so deeply unfounded, and everybody was like, it was just like this profound mystery. I'm just like,
then maybe you should try reading the audiobook that it was heavily based, the book that it was based on.
I can relate to the fact that it wasn't a mystery. To me, it wasn't a big mystery. Like my realization that came from the movie is scientists aren't all nerdy, Star Trek going, perfect celibate Mormon kids. Instead,
that's a stereotype that's been around for longer than it's needed to be.
And I get that. So I always understood that, but to watch this movie and to go in knowing that A, it's going to be long, B, it's going to be super heady. This one is a slow drink.
If you hear Chris Nolan, that's why I enjoyed The Prestige so much the first time, and the many times after was because I knew it was a puzzle going in. And he decided to make it a puzzle for this. It doesn't
always have to be a puzzle, Christopher Nolan.
Well, no. But
the thing about Christopher Nolan movies is the puzzle aspect of his movie. Like Memento is in my top 5 easily.
Sure.
Memento, even Tenet and Inception and all those the
like
disjointed Tenet? Nature of the film is baked into the core concept of the entire thing, and it in itself is deeply fascinating. That's not here in this movie. It's just fucked up because Christopher Nolan.
And look, 100%. Look, full disclosure here, right? my family actually had to deal with a lot of crap from communism. So whenever anyone espouses any sort of benefits of it, I usually like that is a complete turn off for me, right? Like, you know, if I had the capability, I would probably resurrect Stalin just so I could kill him again. But that, and like, so that is off-putting for me in this movie. I'm not saying it isn't. What I'm saying is that for me, I had that connection to this movie because of the science involved, because of the people that I knew were involved. Like there's a moment where, and it's actually, I did a deep dive into the background of this movie. Richard Feynman, okay, so you know how in the movie, and I don't care about spoiling this at all, there's a dude at the Manhattan Project who pulls out bongos? That's Richard Feynman, and he's not credited. But he was there at the Manhattan Project. So when I saw a dude pull out bongos, I'm like, that's Feynman! I know that idiot, right? And as for, you know, like the scientists being kind of like the Mormon puritanical stuff, guys, watch Kinsey, right? You know, like most scientists are, you know, the ones that will do, you know, that are absolutely the freakiest that you'll get. It's just they're very good about being quiet about it.
Well,
right?
and that to me is like the whole thing about it is like scientists have been really good at being quiet about most of the things they're researching. Like it's not until they publish the paper that they share because there's that competition of publishing first.
Yeah.
So like to me, what I didn't see this as like a mystery. Instead, it was like a very obvious character drama, and I didn't see it as a puzzle box either. Like what I saw with the timeline dispute was like one was post-bomb Oppenheimer and what life was like for him, and one was pre-bomb Oppenheimer, and like he was taking 3 hours to tell this story of this man, mad genius life. Like Oppenheimer wasn't Einstein, he wasn't Newton, he wasn't Da Vinci. He was living his life at the peak of his field and then chasing the peak even taller as he was building it underneath him. And so like, what does that guy's life look like? And that I think is why like A, it had to be so long. B, like it explains why this character drama wasn't just like a lot of people have said that this is like a pro-communism show, but I heard one commentary talk about it. Sagar Enjeti from Breaking Points, he did his own review on it. And in his review, he mentioned that the majority of the communists in America, they still hadn't learned about the genocide that came along communism. So all the ones in America legitimately thought Stalin was doing it literally the way Stalin said he was.
The American communists were just reasonable idealists. No different than anyone on this panel, in our comments section. No different than any other person of any ideology that you might
not necessarily though. That's the funny part is like, and that was the part that we saw with Oppenheimer. The reason why he was never a card-carrying member was because he didn't believe the propaganda. He didn't know what the other side looked like.
He wasn't.
But he was like, there's no way you... Right. He was... Utopia can't be real. He's done the math. He's tried, and it doesn't work in his head. Therefore, it can't be real. And so in that essence, he legitimately cannot just join the party implicitly. Because they keep talking about utopia and they keep talking about how like Stalin is creating utopia. And he's like, that's not true. Don't know what the real truth is, but that's definitely fake. And so where people are like, no, this movie is like an ode to communism. It's like, no, it's an ode to reality. The reason people still believe in communism is they grew up listening to those parents. Like people say that the propaganda is the genocide. And it's like, no, all of it's propaganda. Like pro and against on either side is all propaganda because it's that side trying to convince you it's right.
Right.
The true answer is the side with the least deaths, which unfortunately doesn't work in
No,
any of
and-
them yet
and-
because there's so much death and incarceration. But that's another point for another day.
Well, and Emily
But
Blunt,
the
even,
Oppenheimer movie, just to finish my whole point
Right.
out, is that the whole Strauss debate was to prove that even though Oppenheimer was the American Prometheus, the guy who ended the war to end all wars, he was hated within his own lifetime by somebody that literally meant nothing to history except for how vindictive he was and what he did to Oppenheimer, that like we only heard about the Prometheus story and not the fallout because of how like aggressive and egregious the propaganda was.
well, and that's the most
against
brilliant.
Oppenheimer.
That's the most brilliant piece of this movie. Right
exactly,
there,
and
is
that
how
to
much
me is why it was
nothing has
worth 3 hours.
changed. People
Right.
thought Oppenheimer might have been a traitor because somebody said something. It's no different than the things they do today to
And-
try to
and the
cancel
people-
people. It's the
and the people doing
McCarthyism
that stuff,
is the origin
the
of cancel
people-
culture.
the people doing that stuff are just like, no, like if they get canceled, like that's not my fault. All I was doing was saying maybe. I just implied. And it's like that's not true. You
No.
literally implied,
You implied it for a
sparked
reason.
the flame, grew the flame, and then just started pouring oxygen on the flame because you
Right.
are the problem, because you think implication isn't the same as accusation.
Yeah, and I need. Yeah, all right.
And
We gotta
that's
catch up here real
enough.
quick. Disney Sheepherder writes in, nothing better than a bunch of geeks arguing about any movie. 100% agree with you there. Memento owns at Scogliotin. Yes, Christopher Nolan didn't need to play puzzle boy for this movie, this type of movie. Just stick the narrative. I disagree with you there, and here is why. Scogli and Disney Sheepherder, I'm gonna highly recommend you guys check out the book that this movie was based off of. That might be a better medium for you guys to enjoy the story from. And then you might be able to go back and appreciate the visuals better and just see that as an accompaniment to the story now that you've seen it once and you've seen the way that the
Yeah,
pieces
I got
all
a
connect.
credit coming up on Audible, so yeah.
Yeah,
that's
'cause I
going to the
got-
top of the-
Because I saw it
oh,
twice, and going in knowing what the puzzle was this time, he didn't get as puzzly with it. But I agree with him doing it in this movie because some audiences are going to resonate better with that type of storytelling narrative than those who would prefer just the straightforward documentary version style. It's a biopic.
And
It's
the
still
surround
supposed
sound-
to be a movie. It's not a documentary.
Yes.
It's still
No,
supposed to be
I would
dramatized
definitely
somewhere.
declare this a character drama
Yeah.
because there is a narrative, there is a story being played out, and an experience and a life being lived with. Like it's a standard hero's journey, and it's a really good one too because like his point of no return was literally turning his back on the Communist Party. And that was his point where he walked into the abyss being the American government and being a scientist for the arms, like the military. And so there's the rising tension and all of that. But like, to me, this wasn't like I didn't think it was going to be a thriller. I kind of knew how it ended, you know, it's pretty obvious.
That
But at
all
the
being
same-
said, there is one visual point I do want to point out. Did anyone else notice that after the bomb dropped, they altered the guy who was playing Oppenheimer's makeup and lighting so that his face looked very skeletal the rest of the time?
Yeah, that's another piece of the art.
I
that cinema
thought that
brings.
was. I thought he actually like was intentionally like adopting some monk traits and intentionally starving himself. Like I thought that he had. I didn't notice it in the film, but maybe like to me, I just remember hearing that like no, he had basically gone full American monk.
Not quite, but you know, he was still trying. He was attempting at that time to be a little bit more of a family man. Although what happened to his kids is a whole other story.
Here's a
man.
link I found, Disney Sheepherder for the American Prometheus audiobook. But yeah, that's the title of the book, is American Prometheus. So if there's a different distributor you want to find it from or anywhere, that's the title of the book, is American Prometheus. And that's why you have that first opening line about Prometheus, because that's basically what Oppenheimer was.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, I mean, it's a great movie. It humanizes the man. It shows us that it just shows us more of what I've been saying the last few weeks, you know, whether on this show or on Twitter or whatever, is that, you know, Oppenheimer wasn't some super genius, you know, a god among men at all. He was no different than anybody. I mean, they even confirmed that with a line by when he tasks one of his students, here, go do the math. And he's like, well, and he's like, well, your math is better than mine, so I need you to take care of it. He recognizes his limitations and where he knows his own skill and lack thereof. He's a theory guy.
Well, no, to me, that was his truly skill among all skills was the logistics. He was a manager. He knew where he belonged in the hierarchy. I need to be the vision, but as the vision, I cannot be the storyboard. I cannot be the picture. So therefore, I will assign painters to those tasks. And he did. He always backed down. Like when he challenged somebody, he was like, prove it. And they proved it. And he was like, well done.
Yeah. Oh, and
that
there's
was that was beautifully like to me, that's where the slowness mattered the most, was in those scenes, instead of him always being like, you do it, and then it shows the perfect work, and then you do it and it shows perfect work. It's like, no, it was the part where he actually challenged the individual to be like, you deserve this.
And you know what,
now,
Disney
prove me
Sheepherder
right.
and Scoglio, and I'm sitting here and I just thought just now, you know, maybe this would be a chance for Christopher Nolan, assuming he somehow sees this broadcast, or if anybody knows to get it to him, maybe he should consider a cut of the movie that's released in sequence and see if that just ends up, you know, resonating better with people. Because I mean, he could. So I wouldn't imagine it's too hard to do, especially on the digital platform. Just rearrange all the scenes, you know, into a sequential order and see how they play out. Because, yeah, some people prefer the straightforward. I just don't think for what this film opens with the explosion. So right out of the gate, you're already seeing footage of the explosion, and then it, you know, shows to his visions of the quantum realm and trying to visualize that and see that, and that's how we get, you know, the theories come from, and so. That's what I took away from this, was that this is not good just because of what its narrative and what's covering. This movie proves why we even make movies in the first place. Okay? $100 million. Not one frame of CGI. This is a big deal. This is a big deal because it seems that movie studios might be getting ripped off, especially nowadays with what they're paying for CGI. How much was that recent Thor movie that bombed hard? It was like what, $450 million budget, and then
something like that.
All the blobs were out there going, I made $750 million. Okay, that's not how you make money in the industry. Like, to make your budget back, you need to like break even and then some. And so
the audiobook is 26 and a half hours long, and I am much more keen to listen to that than watch the movie again.
Cool, man.
Because that's the whole point of the movie, is to get the story out, and if there's a better medium to get the story out, like that's how I intend to promote Galaxy if I ever do get a screen medium. Is I'm just gonna be like, hey, if you like the book better, great. If you like the movie better, great. I'm glad you like my story. That's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, hey man, you know, look, you get Galaxy out there, I will find you an artist to do like the manga version of it if it.
I was also thinking, I'm not opposed to a manga version, I'm not opposed to digital comics, I'm not opposed, but I did think about it. After watching this movie, I'm almost tempted to commit Galaxia to being entirely practical effects. Bring back models and have model explosions and stuff. Maybe have CGI touch up various aspects of it, like in Force Awakens, but I think that yeah, actually having physical models, if we do a live action, would commit to a that's what I want to do. Thanks to this film, because it showed that, like, that was one of the excuses I've heard, is like, oh, you know, practical effects just aren't so practical because they're expensive. $100 million. That is chump change in Hollywood these days. That's nothing. And he's already going to break, I think he's already projected to break even by this weekend. Because this is going to be the one that people end up going to see, and then Barbie movies they're probably going to slowly switch.
Barbie is already well dwarfed Oppenheimer in.
To start. Okay, so then it's probably just going to taper off over the next couple weeks, and then Oppenheimer will probably continue to slow climb.
So here's what I'm going to say right now, and this is what I'm predicting. These two movies are going to have legs for a while, because let's be honest. until we hit mid-September, October, somewhere in there, there isn't going to be much else in the theater. So this is gonna linger for a while. It's got the perfect window, the two of these movies.
Awesome.
They're gonna have legs.
There's
And they're
good
gonna-
word of mouth on both of them. People are gonna,
Yeah.
Yeah, there is. Disney Sheepherder writes, it says, I enjoyed the movie. My real point, agree with Greg Skull, falls under the fact that I expected a puzzle, and that's what I got. I was hoping for something different, that's all. And that's a fair take entirely. And that's what it comes down to, you know, what makes films subjective versus objective. And I think time's actually going to vindicate this one better, because in the opposite way that it did Inception. Because Inception, you know, as the South Park parodies started coming out and as time went on, I was like, okay, Inception's good because it took a concept with dreaming and made it like more practical and understandable. But really, the entire plot and the rules
And
that
new
change,
again.
it's just kind of. And then Interstellar's kind of the same way, like really great movie.
Interstellar
I love
is
it, but
still my favorite movie.
that
of all
ending
time.
is so fantasy and it's so like guessing, and that's fine.
my God.
Maybe
I'm
that is
totally
what
fine.
maybe that is
Guys?
what happens when you go into a black hole. I don't know. But
I just had the most amazing revelation about this movie, and I now understand something that I didn't understand previously. So, I thought that the nudity in the movie, while enjoyable,
right, I wanted to talk about that.
well, hold on. I think I understand now why it was in there and why it was so long and why they covered so many plot points while the nudity was there. I now understand why. Because if they didn't, this was going to get shown to every high school physics class for the next 20 years after it comes out on DVD.
It's still going to.
Oh, and
And
to
that's
me,
the
I
other,
was
yeah.
like,
So
the nudity was so amazing when it switched to In the Office.
That
Because
worked
was
so
the
well.
most obvious. The Emperor is not wearing any clothes and just totally laying himself bare in the most standard professional way he could, but like to what was playing through his head and through his spouse's head, like the just shame
I could
that
probably
like
say it
only
better
those
myself,
two
but I
were
agree.
experiencing. Everybody else was like, all right, like we don't care, but those two were like, no, this is an intimate affair and it's plagued us for years, and now I'm like cards on the table right now and clothes off. And that was what we saw. To me, I was
Right.
like, okay, all of the nudity now makes sense.
When we first see the boobies, I was like, all right, I guess Nolan put boobies in the movie. All right. And then that scene in the boardroom when he's laid bare like that, I was like,
Yeah, it works.
oh, he tied it into the narrative and explaining like what's going on. And then her imagining them doing it during the scene, like while everybody's talking about it, it's
Just
like
reliving the experience.
everything about that was just, that's why the way that it was told doesn't bother me, because that was with purpose.
Oh no, it totally served the plot. I'm
Right.
just saying, like,
But the timing of it serves the plot as well when they have that sequence and then they later bring it up in the boardroom sequence, and it's a whole, oh man.
Oh yeah.
Or not boardroom,
Dude.
excuse me, hearing room or whatever that fake
The
trial.
the kangaroo
The
courtroom.
kangaroo courtroom. Yeah, that's exactly what that was. Disney Sheepherder says, since you brought it up, Barbie was bad. Saw it with my little girls. They didn't complain, but they also didn't celebrate it. I'm guessing they didn't really care that much about it. So we're gonna cover that on this show. We had some thoughts about Barbie early on in the broadcast, and I think we've come to the consensus that without getting into it too much, we need to review it for next week's show, and we'll get into it then.
So Disney Sheepherder, we highly encourage you to come back next week, where we are going to talk about it. I am also going to be discussing that movie with Cameron Pasha on my channel on my Sunday show. So Sunday morning, 9:30. Please come check it out, because I think we've got some insights that may be at the very least interesting. It may not change your mind, but it may provide a different insight for you.
Nice.
That'll be awesome. Yeah, I personally, I knew it was an SNL skit. I enjoyed it as an SNL skit. I thought it was American Pie, Lego Movie, just all those classic comedies again. But like this, to me, this is where like the difference between like good comedy versus a solid character drama.
I think we've hit it
because when
enough tonight.
Oppenheimer,
Yeah. I really don't want to get into the Barbie discussion at this point because I want to see it for myself, and so I appreciate
Well,
your
yeah.
enthusiasm, but I don't want any further influence, please.
well, no, so that's why I was going into Oppenheimer again. To me, the idea of like Oppenheimer, what it did so well with the like background noises is they weren't all music, like, and the line, "Do you hear the music?" Like when the Geiger counter is ticking off as the music's playing over it, and they're messing with the bomb. In every scene that the bomb is playing, the Geiger counter is going. To me, I was so scared, even though I already knew for a fact that they didn't have any like accidents with the bomb early. The way the Geiger counter is playing, like the amount of just emotional resonance I felt throughout the film because of the soundtrack. Like I think Scogli, that's the part, like that's why I say no matter how you enjoy it in surround sound, because the way the background noise played, there was a couple times where I legitimately thought people were goofing off behind me. And it was the scenes where the scientists are off in their pods doing their individual tasks and they're goofing off. Or when the military is unloading stuff and they're goofing off or counting off or doing something very stereotypical to the setting. Like watching it in the theater, one of the things that I really noticed about it was how much I felt like I was there. And that kept me like emotionally connected. Like I honestly felt like a ghost watching Oppenheimer. Like, it was weird. It was fun. I loved that. And that to me, like, that's why I didn't really see the puzzle so much as like they were displaying a crossword, because that's a fun way to tell a story. And you got to find some way to keep your audience engaged for 3 hours. But the music and the sound and the ambiance as a whole constantly just made me feel like a ghost watching this crossword be filled in. I didn't really feel pulled out of it.
Yeah, it wasn't
I
super
literally felt pulled out of
complicated.
it from the jump.
It wasn't super
In a good
complicated
way.
like The Prestige or like Inception, where you got to go back and rewatch it for Easter eggs. When I watched it a second time, I was very pleased with actually how, it really does. It's a lot easier to understand and accept the second time around because you're not watching, trying to piece it together. You know the story. And like I said, Scogli, Disney Sheepherder, you guys might come back to it after and go, all right, as far as getting this story out here, it's an excellent representation. And if it just doesn't resonate with you, that's totally fine. And, for me, I'm looking at this at multiple angles. The soundtrack angle, the visuals angle, the execution of narrative angle, the acting angle. Like, there is not one bad performance in this entire film. The acting cast, showed up and gave their best. Matt Damon is doing some of the best he has done, and I think, funnily enough, he's actually in a role that is totally appropriate, political, general. Jason Bourne days were cool, but clearly...
Yeah, Matt Damon came out of, a deal he had with his wife to take a break. They were, in wedding counseling, and that was a condition that he was going to take a break from acting. And he was like, okay, my one condition is if Christopher Nolan calls, I'm going to have to do the movie. And she was like, okay. So, yeah, he was in a big hiatus.
Yeah.
And,
Well, he's
he's going back into it.
He was one of the strongest pieces of this movie, and Emily Blunt was just fantastic, especially when she was put on and she starts biting back at the prosecutor and slaps down the notion. It's like, most people don't have anything to do with communism because they've realized that, what they're doing in Russia isn't what we want. That's only one half of it. The other half of it is the part that didn't get touched on in the movie. This is the part that did get away with not having any called out part, and that's what I don't agree with. And that's the McCarthyism. If you want to look want to understand the origins of modern day cancel culture, I was wrong to say that it was the early 90s, 2000s. It was for me because that's what I grew up in. But cancel culture began with McCarthyism. Like, ruining people's jobs and livelihoods just for their political affiliation is wrong. I do not care.
I would actually argue that cancel culture started in Salem, Massachusetts.
There you go. That's another good one.
But in those days, they didn't just cancel you; they just killed you.
Right, and McCarthyism unfortunately had similar incidents as a result because it was just another witch hunt. That's all cancel culture is. It's a witch hunt. And it's all trying to ruin people's lives because you think you're better than somebody because you think you have the correct ideology. Nobody has the correct ideology. We all have our own ideas on how things work in this world. Nobody gets to tell people what to do. Nobody gets to decide whose ideology is correct. If you think yours is correct, demonstrate with reason, demonstrate with facts, demonstrate with actions why you are better. And if your actions require use of firearms, require use of forcing people what to do, get away from me and don't even think about hanging this in your vicinity because this is anti-control. This is always the symbol that's been for freedom for a reason. Now, this symbol has been used to do bad things and justify wars that shouldn't have happened. However, that is not why I fly it. I fly it for what the Constitution says, and what it says is that you have the right to exist and have ideas, same as me, same as Corione, John, Scogli, Marie, Disney Sheepherder, Galenda, Occupy Wallets, Dahlia Lightwood, and everybody else, who lurks and all of that. This is why I hang up this thing. And that's why I'm against McCarthyism. That's why I'm against cancel culture. That's why I'm against witch hunts. That's why I'm against anything that ruins people's lives simply over disagreements of ideology. If you cannot civilly accept that people see the world differently than you, you're the problem, not the person who disagrees with you. And that's pretty much my stance on all of it, and that's what this network pretty much stands behind, is the right to exist and have ideas, good or bad. As long as you aren't harming anybody, I don't care.
And that is, like, you can not like somebody. You can honestly decide.
There's a lot of people that don't like me, and I'm okay with it.
Right. And you can honestly be like, if you have a following, be like, I don't support this person, and you can have all your reasons why. And that's not cancel culture. That is personal bias.
Yeah, that's your own choice.
Yeah, exactly. And that's independent thinking. But the moment you start saying, get off my screen, get off my network, get off my YouTube, like,
look, it's
now you're
okay
being
to
their
decide.
parent.
I will say get off my YouTube
job.
for 12 hours and then we can, come back and see where we're at. Because sometimes you need a cool off period. Sometimes you need a break from people. And I think, a reasonable time period of 12 to 72 hours is totally fair to throw out there and say, can't do it. Because it happens. We get impassioned and we get heated about what we believe. It happens.
And that's feelings. Feelings are fine, but like,
they aren't always facts, but...
Well, no, like, feelings technically are facts. They are the feelings that you had at that time about that thing. And that's a fact.
Well, I guess...
And to recognize that's the other part of, like, all the other problems. Like, if everybody just starts accepting that everybody has feelings, and they're not always going to be the right ones for the moment, but everybody has them, then we can really start just navigating the waters that are individual interactions. But if we start going like, oh, this person needs to be ruined forever because their feelings got out of hand about a particular topic, well, now nobody's solving anything and we're trying to put people in timeout. Like, it didn't work in preschool. It didn't work in Amish culture. It doesn't work ever. Shunning is not the option. Like, it's not good. Excommunication is not the option. The real option is education.
Yeah.
If you disagree with somebody, lay it out and prove them wrong. Yep. And when they go, I just disagree, you go, all right.
Well, I mean, I'm going to borrow a page from P.D. York's, one of his favorite books. And I'm just going to go with something real simple. There was a...
Of course, right as you start saying it, say it again. You got cut out.
Judge not, lest ye be judged. right?
that's the thing. When you're sitting in judgment of somebody else on anything, you're judging yourself. Because you are just as capable of choosing to be like Jesus, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, any, figure in history that you find of respect and is somebody that you can learn from and improve yourself on. Like, you are capable of being the best the humanity has to offer. You are also capable of being Hitler, Mao, or Stalin. Because in the end, and that's what Oppenheimer reminds us, and that's the sobering reminder of the movie, is that we are all capable of doing what he did. And the thing is, it's not so much that, could he, if it was up to him, could he have decided not to? Well, I think if he knew that nobody else would have created the bomb, if he didn't, if that was a guaranteed fact, then yeah, he probably wouldn't have. I don't know for sure. I would like to think that he wouldn't. But the reason that the bomb even existed was because there was a real fear and a real concern that the wrong people might end up getting it. And so it was no longer an issue of, well, should we or shouldn't we? It was an issue of, this is necessary. It's sadly the same reason why the slaves weren't freed on July 4th, 1776, when they absolutely should have been. The Continental Congress didn't have time to consider all the moral ramifications and economic backblow that freeing all the slaves all at once would have done. So they had to make a shitty compromise, and, the end result being that we figured out the slavery problem later. I guess the good thing is we get 2 Independence Days a year now. Of course, in my book, every day is Independence Day. The downside being, we can at least recognize, no, you guys should have just sucked it up and probably pulled the trigger. When it comes to the bomb, it's a little bit of a different compromise. If we didn't get it, maybe the Russians would have. Maybe the Nazis would have. Either way, I don't think there's anybody that I would have preferred to have it first, because it doesn't matter. It created an arms race because nobody trusted each other. Still nobody trusts each other. Probably because our media tells us not to trust each other. I have more in common with everybody on this panel, with poor people in other countries, than I currently do with politicians that supposedly run mine. And that's really the big issue that it comes down to here, is we need to recognize our own power within ourselves. We need to accept the fact that we are all equally valuable. We all matter, because we do. Doesn't matter what your position is in life, whether you want to surf the waves of Hawaii or all the beaches of the world, or whether you want to be a CEO of a company, provided you get there honestly and don't screw people over to get to the top. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Your life matters. We all have a spare shot, and we all need to focus. I mean, as Ahmaud Arbery's father would say, it's about making a better world for everybody, for all people. That's what we want to circulate with these ideas that we talk about. And that's why we get passionate about pop culture, because storytelling is, regardless of what religious fundamentalists or staunch anti-story people will try to say that Hollywood is unnecessary in entertainment. No, it doesn't need to be as bloated, but entertainment there will always be a need for it. That's the reason why independent authors like me exist, is because we can provide entertainment that is not corporatized or owned by anybody.
Oh, dude, we've been entertaining each other since we were sitting around campfires and and telling each other stories, right? It's essential to the human condition that we bond together over stories. Without it, we're just not human.
And what better way to bond rather than constantly just rehashing high school stories or rehashing the good old days stories? Like, why not bond over a fun story like anything the entertainment industry cooks up? Like, yeah, the other reason we're here is to call them out when they do it wrong. And what do we always call out? We call it the bad work. Because, like, you are getting paid to do this, so do it right, and do it right the first time. And I think that's like the part of the issue that a lot of people have with the entertainment industry in general, is they're like, why do you need to be entertained? And it's like, because what's the point of being alive if all we're doing is working and sleeping? Like, let's have some good times in there. Otherwise, it's just work, sleep, balance.
Otherwise, you're some sort of Maoist new man, and I'm going to put a hard pass on that. Right?
Yeah.
That's what they say.
Exactly. We want to thank everybody for tuning in, whether you lurked, whether you commented, whether you watch on the replay. We appreciate all the support that we can do. We absolutely enjoy doing this. I enjoy it the more I do it, whether I'm streaming games, whether I'm streaming this show, whatever I'm working on. This stuff is awesome, and whatever occupation I have to have on the side to keep the bills going, it's always been worth it to me, and I hope it is worth it to you guys to have a place. There's currently, I'll just speak openly about it because it doesn't really matter. It's not going to affect our numbers either way. There's currently a little bit of a divide at the moment in certain YouTube communities, and I want to make sure that you guys understand that TWB's stance is and always will be for the truth. We will stand by people who want to be real, who want to be straightforward, who aren't seeking any kind of agenda-driven bullshit, who just want to share their ideas and why they're important to them, and that's what the Ryder Brothers will always be about. We aren't about pushing one thing or the other. We are a very open and accepting group that will let people speak their ideas. Whether we agree with them or not, this is a place that we want to try and facilitate discussion. So you're never going to see us berate or tell people who to be friends with, not to be friends with, because that's just not how the adult world works. And that's not a world that I want to live in anyway. So, yeah, people who do
Although
that,
I will say that we would prefer to be your friend.
pretty much, and we're pretty easy to get along with until you give us a reason not to. It's really not as hard as people make it out to be because of their own inability to talk like normal adults. But anyway, for those of you that have figured out what kind of show we are and what we do, welcome, and we're glad to have you. And we hope you guys keep coming around. And if there's content suggestions, we are open to ideas. We may not get to it right away. We may put it off, for other stuff that may come up. It's nothing personal, but, we got to do our content. But we are definitely open to ideas. And especially if there's excitement for something, we definitely want to get on it. So any last final thoughts the last couple of seconds? I think I already thanked everybody who watched in the comments section. And
cheers, everybody.
Next week,
Thanks for hanging out.
I think we're doing Strange New Worlds, Barbie, and then I think we do have a couple of DS9s we'll plan, but we'll figure it out. I'm Petey York, the Ryder Brothers. See you when I see ya. This has been a presentation of the Ryder Brothers Tuesday Night Live Show. The Ryder Brothers, restoring respect into discourse.